I'm really so pleased about our next speaker. It's Alan Canner, and he's going to be talking about transforming the U.S. media commercial-free at last. I'm pleased about Alan being here because he's a co-founder of the Campaign for Commercial-Free Childhood, and he was at the very first Golden Marble protest and has been, for one reason or another, unable to come back to any of our events since, although he's been very heavily involved in shaping CCFC. He's a psychologist. He's co-edited 2 books, The Psychology and Consumer Culture and Eco-Psychology. And he's currently writing a column for Tikkun magazine on the corporatized society. Alan?
Okay, it works. Hi, everyone. It's great to be here. On January 1st, 2007, Sao Paulo, Brazil, went commercial-free. People know about this? The Clean City law that went into effect last year in South America's largest city means the metropolis no longer tolerates billboards, flashing neon signs, and electronic message panels on its streets and buildings, flyers and bulletins in public spaces, and advertising on the sides of its taxis and buses. Strict limits have been imposed on the size of signs on storefronts. And this is a quote: "We are aiming for a complete change of culture," said Roberto Tripoli, president of the city council. And a columnist and historian, Roberto Pompey de Toledo, excuse my pronunciation, calls the law a rare victory of the public interest over private, order over disorder, aesthetics over ugliness, cleanliness over trash. For once in life, all that is accustomed to coming out on top in Brazil has lost. Of course, Clear Channel, the world's largest producer of billboards, is suing Sao Paulo to have the law overturned. But the idea of a commercial-free city is catching. The cities of Rio de Janeiro, Brasilia, and Porto Alegre in Brazil, and Buenos Aires in Argentina are considering measures to reduce or ban outdoor advertising. And further, and I was pretty surprised to learn this, in the US, Vermont, Maine, Hawaii, and Alaska all prohibit billboards, as do 1,500 other small towns in this country. And as moving beyond outdoor advertising, as many of you know, Sweden, Denmark, Greece, and Quebec in Canada all restrict or ban television advertising aimed at children. And in Britain, junk food ads aimed at children have recently been banned. So today, I want to talk about the commercial-free part of the campaign for a commercial-free childhood. And our position on this has been that there's no good reason to market to children and many good reasons not to saturate their lives with commercial messages. And products for children, if they must, can be pitched to their parents. But what do we mean by commercial-free? How do we get there? What are the necessary steps? And what are the implications of going commercial-free for our economic system, for the kinds of changes that we'll need to see in corporations, and even for capitalism? And that's really what I want to talk about. It's interesting that it's hard to talk about this topic, and I think, as you'll see, we run into a taboo in our society around criticizing capitalism, because when we really talk about limiting advertising in a serious way, we come immediately up against issues like corporate free speech. The corporations rattle that sword rather readily when we actually speak about this topic, and then everyone else gets scared when that happens. So I think it's useful to allow ourselves to imagine what a commercial-free childhood in society would really look like. To get to that point, I want to share quickly some pertinent history that I just learned about. In the late 20s and early 1930s, before the passage of the Communication Act of 1934 settled the issue, there arose a brief-lived but fierce movement for radio broadcasting to be commercial-free. Do people know about this? Is this 1934? It was a little while ago. In the mid-20s, before this happened, many radio stations were nonprofit. They were run by civic and religious organizations, labor unions, and in particular colleges and universities. And most of the for-profit stations were more focused on generating good publicity for their owners' primary enterprise, such as a newspaper or a department store, than to make the station itself profitable by selling advertising time. So the idea that you could make money by running a radio station hadn't taken hold at that time. And it wasn't until the late 1920s when then the two big networks were NBC and CBS realized that they could make money, that they began their lobbying for laws that would lock the medium into a for-profit mode, and they managed to load the key committee that was making decisions about this with their people, and so it slipped right on through. The resistance to this that came from educational institutions, newspapers, labor unions, and the ACLU, who now protects corporate free speech. And they took the position, the ACLU did, and this is from Robert McChesney's book, Telecommunications, Mass Media, and Democracy. So I'm quoting, commercial broadcasting was inherently incapable of presenting controversial programming and innately undemocratic, even if there was no government censorship. So this is what these people were saying in the late 1920s and early 30s. And this is a quote from Joy Elmer Morgan, the chair of the Higher Education Coalition that was fighting the commercialization of radio. And they had a big fancy name, the National Committee of Education by Radio. And here's what he said. As a result of radio broadcasting, there will probably develop during the 20th century either chaos or a world order of civilization. Whether it shall be one or the other will depend upon whether broadcasting be used as a tool of education or as an instrument of selfish greed. So far, our American radio interests have thrown their influence on the side of greed. There has never been in the entire history of the United States an example of mismanagement and lack of vision so colossal and far-reaching in its consequences as the turning of the radio channels almost exclusively into commercial hands. So they got it. At least some of these people did. And it's interesting for us to know that people were seeing where this was going way back when. I mean, I don't know if chaos versus whatever, if it all came true, but people were seeing huge dangers ahead. And they failed, and there was infighting among them and all the kinds of things that happened, and they didn't have enough money, and on and on and on. We know this story very well. But the resistance was there, and the victory of the networks in the 1930s set the stage for the commercialization of all subsequent public media in the United States, including television and now the internet.